I remember the exact Saturday I realized I had been playing the wrong game my entire adult life. I was sitting in a car dealership waiting room, holding a bottle of water they had given me, while a salesperson ran my credit. The car was a lease, $41,000. Monthly payment, $712. I had test driven it twice. I liked how I felt walking toward it in the parking lot more than I liked anything about the drive. I made $71,000 a year. I was 29 years old. I had $4,200 in savings. My retirement account had $11,000 in it. I had been working for 7 years, and I was about to sign a document committing $712 a month for 36 months to a vehicle that would be worth 60% of its purchase price the moment I drove it off the lot. The salesperson came back. The credit was approved. He slid the paperwork across the table. I picked up the pen, and then something stopped me. Not wisdom, not financial literacy. I did not have either of those yet. What stopped me was a memory. My uncle David had died 4 months earlier. He was 67. He had worked for 39 years as an engineer at the same company. At his funeral, his oldest son mentioned quietly that he had left just under $2 million in retirement accounts. $2 million on an engineer's salary, in a house he had bought in 1991 and never upgraded, in cars that were always at least 4 years old, in a wardrobe that looked exactly the same at 65 as it had at 45. I put the pen down. I told the salesperson I needed to think about it. I drove home in my 2017 Toyota Camry with the slightly scratched rear bumper, and I started reading everything I could find about how people like my uncle actually built that kind of wealth. What I found was not what I expected. It was not about exceptional income. It was not about perfect timing in the stock market. It was not about starting a business or inheriting money or getting lucky with a single investment. It was about refusal, specifically 10 refusals that people like my uncle practiced so consistently that researchers identified them as defining behavioral patterns of genuinely wealthy people. Before we get into it, if this video shows you something about how money actually works that nobody ever taught you, hit subscribe and leave a like. It takes 2 seconds. Now let's get into the 10 refusals. Refusal 1. They refuse to buy things to impress people they do not care about. This is the foundational refusal, the one every other item on this list ultimately traces back to. Tom Corley spent 5 years studying the daily habits of 233 wealthy individuals for his Rich Habits research. What he found was that the wealthy had almost completely severed the connection between spending and social validation. They bought things because the things served a function. The purchase was evaluated on utility, durability, and value, never on what it would communicate to an observer. The Ramsey Solutions National Study of Millionaires confirmed this at scale. 94% of millionaires live below their means. 6 out of 10 live in homes worth less than $500,000. 61% of households earning over $250,000 a year drive Toyotas, Hondas, and Fords. The median price paid by millionaires for their most recent vehicle was $31,367, according to Experian Automotive data. These are not people who cannot afford the luxury version. These are people who looked at the luxury version, ran the math, and said no. Meanwhile, 8% of people earning less than $100,000 a year own a luxury model car. People who cannot afford the signal are buying it. People who can afford it are refusing to. When you disconnect spending from status, you free up an enormous amount of money and an even more enormous amount of mental energy. My uncle drove a 4-year-old Subaru Outback until it had 190,000 miles on it. Everyone at his funeral who had no idea about the $2 million thought he was just a modest guy. He was not modest. He was wealthy. The distinction matters enormously. Refusal 2, they refused to pay interest on depreciating assets. The car dealership moment I described at the beginning is the clearest possible illustration of this refusal. Wealthy people are not anti-debt across the board. Many carry mortgages because a mortgage attaches debt to an appreciating asset. What wealthy people refuse to do is attach debt to things that lose value. Cars, furniture, electronics, clothing on buy, now pay later plans. These are depreciating assets, items worth less tomorrow than they are today. Financing them means paying interest to own something shrinking in value while making the payments. Going backwards in 2 directions simultaneously. The average new car payment hit $767 a month at the end of 2025, according to Experian. A person who finances a $48,000 vehicle at 7% over 84 months pays roughly $58,752 total. The car is worth maybe $19,000 by the time they finish paying for it. They paid nearly $60,000 for a $19,000 asset. Total U.S. household debt crossed $18.8 trillion at the end of 2025, according to the New York Federal Reserve. Credit card balances hit $1.28 trillion. Auto loans reached $1.67 trillion. Wealthy people look at these numbers the way a doctor looks at a patient ignoring every warning sign. They understand the mechanism. They see the destruction. They walk away. Refusal 3. They refuse to let lifestyle expand with income. My uncle got promoted 4 times over his career. Each promotion came with a meaningful salary increase. Each time his colleagues upgraded their homes, their cars, their vacations, their wardrobes. Each time my uncle did not. His house was the same house. His car was always a few years old. His vacations were road trips and state parks, not because he could not afford better, because he understood that the gap between what you earn and what you spend is the only number that actually matters in building wealth. And he protected that gap with everything he had. The Ramsey Millionaire Study found that only 31% of millionaires averaged a 6-figure income over their careers. 1/3 never hit $100,000 in any single year. They got wealthy on moderate salaries because the moderate salary was enough. The gap between income and spending was wide, and they kept it wide year after year, decade after decade, while their neighbors' gaps closed with every raise. Fidelity reported that the average total savings rate among 401k participants hit 14.2% in the fourth quarter of 2025, including employer matches. But that is an average pulled upward by the people who increase their contribution every time their income increases. The people who did not are the ones whose lifestyle absorbed the raise before their retirement account ever saw it. Refusal 4, they refuse to make financial decisions based on emotion. The entire American consumer economy is built on emotional triggers. Flash sales create urgency, limited time offers create scarcity, marketing campaigns create aspiration, social media creates comparison. Every purchase prompt you encounter is designed to bypass your rational brain and activate the emotional one. Wealthy people have built systems that override this. They wait 24 hours before making any purchase over $50. They make major financial decisions on spreadsheets, not on feelings. They ask a question most consumers never think to ask. If this item were not on sale, would I still buy it at full price? If the answer is no, the sale is not saving them money. It is costing them money they would not otherwise have spent. Americans spent an average of $282 a month on impulse purchases in 2024, according to Capital One shopping data. That is $3,381 a year on things they did not plan to buy. Clothing was the top impulse category, followed by food, then household items. 80% of those purchases happened in physical stores where product placement, checkout aisle design, and end cap displays are scientifically engineered to trigger emotional buying. Wealthy people do not avoid stores. They avoid emotional states inside stores. They arrive with a list. They leave with only what is on the list. The list is the firewall between rational intention and emotional impulse. Refusal 5. They refuse to ignore where their money goes. 47% of Americans entered 2026 without any budget, according to YouGov data. Nearly 3/4 underestimate their subscription spending by more than $100 a month. The average American cannot accurately account for roughly $800 to $1,000 of monthly spending when asked to estimate it on the spot. The money simply vanishes into a fog of tap swipes and auto renewals. Wealthy people do not let money move without observation. Many use systems as simple as a notebook. Others use spreadsheet reviews. The tool does not matter. What matters is the behavior, regularly at least monthly looking at exactly where every dollar went and asking whether each category of spending aligns with what they actually value. Tom Corley's Rich Habits research found that 88% of wealthy individuals saved at least 10 to 20% of their income. You cannot consistently save 10 to 20% if you do not know where the other 80 to 90% is going. Awareness is the prerequisite for wealth building. Without it, invisible spending categories silently consume the gap between income and expenses until there's nothing left to invest. People who track spending save 15 to 20% more than people who do not, according to multiple behavioral finance studies. Most people do not have an income problem, they have a visibility problem. Wealthy people refuse to let money move in the dark. Refusal 6. They refuse to carry credit card balances. 75% of millionaires have never carried a credit card balance in their lives, according to Thomas Stanley's research. Never. Not once. Not even when they were starting out. Not even when money was tight. They found another way. They cut spending elsewhere. They delayed the purchase. They used savings. They did whatever was necessary to avoid paying 22% interest on a purchase that was already depreciating. My uncle had one credit card his entire adult life. He paid it in full every month for 40 years. He used it for the points. He never paid $1 of interest. He thought of credit card interest the way most people think of getting robbed. It is money taken from you by force, except you signed the agreement that allowed it. Total US credit card debt is $1.28 trillion as of late 2025. The average balance is about $6,500 at 22.4% APR. Minimum payments on that balance stretch the payoff to 18 years and cost over $9,000 in interest. The total price tag becomes, search out roughly $15,500 for $6,500 of purchases. Wealthy people understand that 22% working against you destroys wealth faster than 8% working for you can build it. The spread between those two rates is the distance between financial freedom and financial prison. The wealthy pick a side and compound in their favor. Refusal 7. They refuse to upgrade their phone every cycle. Wealthy people view technology as a tool, not a status marker. They replace tools when tools stop functioning, not when a newer version is released. Only 23.5% of millionaires owned a vehicle from the current model year. The same pattern applies to personal electronics. A 3-year-old phone does everything a new phone does. The camera is marginally different. The processor is slightly slower in benchmarks no human can perceive during normal use. And the new model costs $800 to $1,200. On a financing plan, it is $35 to $65 a month in perpetuity because the cycle resets every 12 to 18 months. Over a decade, upgrading annually versus keeping a phone for 3 to 4 years costs between $5,000 and $9,000. That number alone builds a meaningful contribution to a Roth IRA or emergency fund. But the bigger cost is the mindset the cycle reinforces. Annual upgrading trains your brain to associate current with adequate and previous with insufficient. That association bleeds into every other consumer category. If last year's phone is insufficient, then last year's car might be too, and last year's apartment. The upgrade cycle is not about the phone, it is about the psychological infrastructure that makes perpetual consumption feel normal. Wealthy people broke that infrastructure early, they use a device until it stops working, then they replace it with something functional. The interval between replacements is years, not months. Refusal 8. They refuse to spend their time passively. Tom Corley's 5-year study found that 67% of wealthy individuals watch less than 1 hour of television per day. Only 6% watch reality TV. Meanwhile, 77% of lower income individuals in the same study spent more than an hour daily on television streaming and passive scrolling. 88% of wealthy people read for at least 30 minutes a day, primarily self-improvement business and financial education. And the average American spends over 4 hours per day consuming media, according to a marketer. That is 28 hours a week, roughly 1,450 hours per year in passive consumption mode. What if 10% of that time, roughly 3 hours per week, was redirected to financial education? Over a year, that is 156 hours of learning about compound interest, tax-advantaged accounts, credit optimization, debt management, and investment fundamentals. Within 2 to 3 years, you would have a deeper understanding of money than 90% of the American population. My uncle read for an hour every night after dinner for his entire adult life. Not novels, business books, biographies of investors, annual reports, personal finance fundamentals. The man who left $2 million did not get lucky with a stock tip. He spent 40 years consuming information that made every financial decision smarter than the one before it. Refusal 9. They refuse to surround themselves with people who normalize financial dysfunction. Corley's research found that 93% of self-made wealthy people credited their success in part to surrounding themselves with supportive, like-minded individuals. They actively curated relationships with people who shared their values around money delayed gratification and long term thinking. His data showed that lower income individuals spend an average of 6.5 hours per week in idle conversation and gossip versus half an hour for the wealthy. This is not about elitism, it is about behavioral contagion. Your spending habits, savings rate, and financial attitudes are measurably influenced by the 5 people you spend the most time with. If your friend group normalizes financing $45,000 cars, your brain starts treating that as baseline. If nobody in your circle talks about investing, investing feels like a fringe activity instead of a standard behavior. Wealthy people did not all start out in wealthy circles. Many deliberately sought out financially disciplined people through mentoring relationships, professional groups, or online communities. They moved toward people who made building wealth feel normal and moved away from people who made consuming wealth feel normal. If your social circle spends $2,000 a month more than necessary on lifestyle signaling, and you participate, that is $24,000 a year not invested. At 8% over 20 years, that is roughly $1.2 million your social life consumed. Your friend group is not just your social life. It is a financial variable. The wealthy treat it like 1, refusal 10. They refuse to make major financial decisions without understanding the full cost. This brings me back to the car dealership. The salesperson slid the paperwork across the table, and I almost signed it because I was thinking about the monthly payment. $712, I made $71,000 a year. I could technically afford $712 a month, but that was the sticker price of the decision, not the full price. The full price included 36 months of payments, totaling $25,632, plus insurance on a more expensive vehicle, plus the opportunity cost of that capital not invested, plus the depreciation making the car worth significantly less than I paid by month 1. Wealthy people slow down at the point of decision. They refuse to transact on autopilot. They ask, what does this actually cost me in total over time, including everything I will not be able to do with this money instead? A $3,000 couch financed at 0% for 24 months is not $3,000. It is $3,000 of capital not invested for 2 years, plus the psychological normalization of financing household goods, which leads to financing the next thing and the thing after that. That question applied consistently to every major purchase is the difference between a person whose money compounds for them and a person whose money compounds for someone else's quarterly earnings report. Here's what connects all 10 of these refusals. They are not separate behaviors, they are expressions of a single underlying principle. Wealthy people understand how money works over time. They see every dollar in 2 currencies simultaneously, today's value and tomorrow's compounded value. A $7 coffee is $7 today and about $69 in 30 years at 8%. A $767 car payment is $767 today and roughly $7,600 in lost compounding per month of the loan. When you see money this way, every refusal on this list stops being a sacrifice and starts being obvious. You are not giving up the coffee. You are choosing $69 over 7. The math is not even close. The average American does not see money this way because nobody taught them to. The TIAA Institute found that only 31% of Gen Z could answer basic financial literacy questions correctly. Among Gen X, the most financially literate generation, it was still only 52%. Roughly half the country cannot explain how compound interest works, cannot define APR in practical terms, cannot articulate the difference between an asset and a liability. These are not advanced concepts. They are the fundamental rules of the game everyone is already playing, whether they know it or not. My uncle understood these rules. He encountered them somewhere early in his career, and they restructured every financial decision he made for the next 4 decades. The $2 million he left behind was not the result of a brilliant investment or a lucky break. It was the predictable mathematical consequence of 10 quiet refusals repeated every month for 39 years. No one at his funeral called him lucky. They called him careful. They were wrong about the word. The word is not careful. The word is literate. He understood the game. He played accordingly. The score at the end reflected it. I drove home from that car dealership in my scratched 2017 Camry, and I did not buy the lease. I kept the Camry for another 3 years. I invested the $712 a month I would have spent on payments. I opened a Roth IRA for the first time.
I started tracking every dollar I spent. I negotiated my insurance. I deleted shopping apps from my phone. I started reading instead of scrolling. None of it felt dramatic in the moment. It felt like 10 small decisions that did not add up to much individually. That is exactly how wealth building feels from the inside. Small decisions that do not look like anything until years pass, and the compounding curve starts to bend, and you check the number and realize the boring decisions were not boring at all. They were the whole game. If this video showed you something real about how the wealthy actually think, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Next week, we're going inside each of these 10 refusals with the exact systems that make them automatic, not willpower. Systems. The difference between the two is the difference between doing this for 3 weeks and doing it for 30 years. See you there.